Buckle up, because I'm about to take you on a roller coaster of emotions with these up-and-coming case battles. In round 1, we can see New York Times versus U.S. and New York Times versus Sullivan. In the former, we have the publication of the Pentagon Papers, while in the latter, it defines libel in court. And we can see New York Times v. Sullivan wins with a solid lead due to the precedent it sets with the First Amendment and press. Next, we have Gibbons v. Ogden pinned against McCulloch versus Maryland. Here, it's a complete blowout, with Gibbons granting Congress the power of regulating interstate commerce as opposed to taxing the second bank of the U.S. Now is Marbury v. Madison and Plessy v. Ferguson. If we take a deep dive here, we can see that Marbury establishes the power of judicial review, while Plessy is later overturned with its segregation laws. And I think the result is self-explanatory there. Here's an interesting one. Miranda v. Maryland versus U.S. v. Nixon. Miranda makes a big play by establishing the U.S. citizens' Miranda rights, but we see U.S. v. Nixon pull ahead by shooting down executive privilege from being an untouchable power of the executive. Up next is D.C. v. Heller and U.S. v. Lopez. Both teams make similar plays into gun laws, but we can see Heller take the game by protecting gun ownership under the Second Amendment, while Lopez deems it not a part of interstate commerce. And here's Tinker v. Des Moines versus Lemon versus Kurtzman. Tinker redefines the First Amendment afforded to students on campus, while Lemon only states that you can't bar any one individual from public school. I guess Tinker versus Des Moines wins. Mapp v. Ohio and Gitlow v. New York is up next on our plate. It's a breeze for Mapp by stating that unlawfully obtained evidence is void in court rather than inciting violent protests being prosecutable. Also, because communism never prevails. Now, let's wrap up this first round with Texas v. Johnson and Angel v. Vitale. Here we can see the First Amendment rights being reconfirmed with the burning of the American flag, while Angel trains behind with declaring the unconstitutionality of requiring kids to play in public school. I guess Texas v. Johnson wins. Now we move on to the Sweet 16s. Gibbons v. Ogden pulls through in the second half of the game, overpowering the press precedent with the sheer power of the Commerce Clause. Next, Marbury v. Madison takes a similar approach as Gibbons and overpowers Nixon's losing of infallible executive privilege with the monster of judicial review changing the power dynamic of the government. D.C. v. Heller and Tinker v. Des Moines has a nail-biting finale with D.C. just barely edging past. They both make a power play on the Second and First Amendment respectively, but D.C. just barely edges it in the end. Now we can see Mapp v. Ohio win with a considerable lead against Texas v. Johnson. I guess unlawfully obtained evidence being ruled out of court is just more important than burning the American flag. Ooh, here we go. Fresh off the stands. Now it's the Elite Eight. With the two giants of the Commerce Clause and judicial review battling out, who knows who could have won. But here we see Marbury v. Madison edge through, probably due to its fundamental changes with our up-and-coming government. Now here's Mapp v. Ohio being the fan favorite, beating out D.C. v. Heller. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Always the most important part of any argument, especially this one. Gun laws just don't cut it here. March Madness isn't over yet. Now I'm handing it off to Charlie.
Yeah. Thank you, Fails. My name is Charlie. I will report the rest of the Supreme Court March Madness cases for you. Starting with the civil rights region, Brown versus Board of Education going up against the Heart of Atlanta versus the United States. Two teams based their strategies on racial segregation, but Brown versus Board of Education goes on top based on the precedent it establishes that racial segregation is unconstitutional. Now, going up next, is Gerswell versus Connecticut going up against Roe v. Wade. This match goes handedly to Roe v. Wade due to the fact that Roe v. Wade basically legalizes abortion due to privacy reasons. Now the next match. Kuroshima versus the United States going up against Dred Scott versus Stanford. Dred Scott takes a considerable lead here due to it being an infamous case deciding that slaves cannot be citizens, therefore have no right to sue the government. Next match is Shelby County versus Holder going up against Gildan versus Wheelwright. Wheelwright takes this by considerably and is our projected winner due to the fact that it requires every person be on trial to have an attorney. And landmark case in the civil rights and criminal justice system. That is all this civil rights region. Moving on to the political region. The first one is about campaign finance. The Citizens United versus FEC going up against Buckley versus Valio. Citizens United takes it here due to the fact that it rules the corporations can be people and their donations are free speech. Now, two cases on marriage equality. Loving versus Virginia handily takes the lead against Gobenfeld versus Hobbs due to the fact that Loving versus Virginia legalizes interracial marriage and it's frankly has a more legal precedent than gay marriage. Next is a political teams going up against each other. Baker versus Carr going up against Bush v. Gore. Baker versus Carr takes the win here due to the fact that it establishes every state has to have the exact number of representatives based on their constituent. At last, we have regions of University of California versus Blake going up against Schoeneck versus the United States. The University of California takes the win here due to the fact it basically legalizes affirmative action in college decisions. Now, I will be doing the final four. Unfortunately, my co-host Fails has died in a tragic accident involving a cantaloupe and two snakes. First off, Map versus Ohio going up against Marbury versus Madison. Marbury versus Madison takes it because it's the bedrock of American judicial review. Now, Brown versus Board of Education going up against the UC versus Blake. UC versus Blake takes it here due to the fact that the legalization and the constitutionality of affirmative action is so controversial and so important to many Americans. Now, the finals. Brown versus NPR and WBEZ Chicago is now ready to project that the winner of 2019's March Madness is Marbury versus Madison due to it's such a bedrock of American judicial review that Marbury versus Madison is the winner of this year's March Madness.